Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathan Shannon. I am the Deputy Director of the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. Thank you for joining us today for our COVID-19 Helping Consumers Through This Time. This is an interview series where we're talking to industry experts about their thoughts and opinions and best practices on how we can best help consumers in their energy usage during this time. So today we're lucky to be joined by Dave Elve from PayGo. And just to start it off, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to give a little bit more insight on what he does at PayGo, as well as maybe any of the changing roles that his organization has had during COVID. So Dave, thanks for being with us today. Share a little bit more about what you do.
Hey, thanks, Nathan. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, and it's always a pleasure to talk to your audience. Again, I'm Dave Elve with PayGo. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the company. I've been in the industry over 25 years, and I'm always excited to talk about, meter to cash. We used to call it meter to cash. Now, I guess customer to cash, customer engagement in the utility industry. It's evolved so much over the last, again, 25 years. It's even hard to imagine where we were back then to where we are today. So I really manage our marketing efforts, sales, and channels, and I do interact with analysts and industry folks like yourselves on a daily basis.
Thanks, Dave. So has your role changed any in the last few months during the pandemic, as we've seen some shifting needs from customers? Has your role shifted?
Well, it's in some ways it has in that we've tried to be somewhat reactive to what's going on in the marketplace. Obviously, in March when COVID really hit, we're out selling marketing, billing, and payments and prepay solutions to our customers. And once COVID hit, we were really kind of challenged with how do we support our utility clients, right? We have several large clients out there that have been really hugely impacted by this, and certainly with our customers. And is there a way that we can better support our clients by maybe tweaking our offering or our messaging, our business practices to support clients that are really what we're finding are really in need because of being let go from work and all the issues that we're seeing around COVID. So yeah, I would say from a business practice and a business standpoint, yes. But day to day, I'm doing a lot of stuff online, and I will say the technology has gotten a lot better over the last year or so.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a new normal for everyone. I think
Sure.
Everyone's getting used to this now and coming to terms with getting everything set up, technology at home. So I think we're all in that same boat there.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to know, do you have any idea or stats on the percentage of consumers who are going to be behind on their bills? Possibly, have you heard a lot in that area, and in particular, working with prepay customers? How are their accounts looking? What's the differences there that you've seen over the past few months, and maybe what do you forecast as we go forward?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we provide prepay to lots of these larger utilities. Really across our customer base, we saw generally a positive $20 to $30 balance on prepay accounts, and that's across all prepay customers. Generally, it's 5 to 7 days. With prepay customers, generally pay once a week versus once a month. So, 7 day balance, $20, $30 is probably average. And this was pre-COVID. Once COVID hit, really not long after that, we saw our balances on our customer accounts actually dip to be negative. So again, you look at the entire customer base, the average customer had a negative balance. First time we'd ever seen that. We'd also seen a very substantial reduction in the number of payments. Again, a lot of customers were unable to work and let go, furloughed from their jobs. We also saw the average payment amounts smaller than usual. Again, customers are more cash flow challenged, and they're making smaller payments than maybe they were before. So we saw a good bit of that, which to us just shows the impact that COVID was having really on a day-to-day basis on the customers that are using our programs.
So Dave, we know the moratorium on cutoffs will be lifted soon. Some utilities have already lifted it. What do you think that's going to do for customer call centers? Do you think they'll be inundated? And what advice do you have for utilities in dealing with consumers who are now forced to pay their back payments and arrearages in order for their energy not to be cut off?
Yeah, good question, Nathan. So a couple things. Let me just kind of give some background. Even pre-COVID, when customers would come out, we call the call center looking for a payment arrangement. We generally saw anywhere between 67 to 80+% of payment arrangements fail. And what do I mean by that? Well, these are customers that call in, are behind on their bill, they have a $150 bill they can't pay, suddenly they get disconnected, they get a late fee, sometimes they even add a deposit to that, and suddenly that $150 bill goes to $300, and again, if you can't pay a $150 bill, you can't pay a $300 bill, right? So then you get a call to the call center, and then those are typically long calls. Payment arrangement calls can last several minutes to 30 minutes long, right? And especially if they get escalated. We've seen where a customer will call 140 times in a quarter, getting one payment arrangement from one rep to another rep. So we've seen that really even pre-COVID. Today, during COVID, we actually saw during a period where customers weren't being disconnected, we actually saw a decline of actual calls and average handle times for calls. Once the utilities start going back to doing disconnects, we anticipate a really a high volume calls, right? The volumes of calls going higher, average handle times going back up. What's interesting about prepay we've seen over time is that about 80% of customers that come on a prepay program with an arrearage, say a $350 arrearage like I did, will tend to pay that off. 80% come on the program with arrearage, will pay that arrearage off over just the next several months. The biggest arrearage we've ever seen was $6,000 that someone paid off over 3 years. But again, it's a big number. 80% of payment arrangements failing versus 80% of people coming on prepay actually paying it off. My concern about post-COVID is that I think that the arrearages are going to be much higher than pre-COVID. So, a bill that customer can't pay pre-COVID might be $100 or $300. I'm afraid that post-COVID it could be $800 to $1,000. Don't have those numbers yet because every utility has different length durations of their moratoriums on disconnections.
Right. No, that's a good point. It's different for everyone. I know all the IOUs have more of a advantage to being able to extend theirs out longer, where we have some municipalities that weren't able to do that. So it's definitely different depending on every energy provider.
Sure.
So one thing I wanted to talk about is, was there anything starting out in 2020 when we were kind of back in what our typical normal times were, anything that you thought would happen in the energy industry that is now not going to happen or won't happen due to the pandemic and what that has done to the industry?
Well, I touched on it earlier when we first started talking about, investments in customer engagement. I think there was one of the things I've seen a lot in the industry that's changed a lot is the focus on customer engagement. So over the last few years, we've seen, utilities spending a lot of money on customer engagement portals and mobile apps and we used to call CRM systems, Salesforce, and those to really manage customer expectations, help in messaging and message flows in the call center. Those types of engagements, again, to kind of work with customers and be better at customer management. I think now what we're seeing is with COVID is the utilities have taken their eyes off the ball a little bit. And let me add too, energy efficiency too is something that I thought we would see more of going into 2020. But again, customer engagement, energy efficiency. Unfortunately, utilities have had to take their eyes off those balls a little bit, right? And they really have to focus on what's my messaging around COVID, right? I can't take payments in my office anymore. I got to figure out how to take payments remotely. I've got to figure out, how to message the customer about my disconnection program or, moratorium programs. How do I message that? And it needs to be done in a friendly but informative way so that customers really know what's going on. They don't have questions and they're not calling my call center, maybe overly anxious about, am I going to get disconnected and I don't have a job, right? So I really think, Nathan, those are two things that, I probably had anticipated going into this year to see will probably get delayed until after post-COVID. But again, I think, focused on COVID messaging and business processes around COVID, I think have been really taken center stage this year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Utilities were being pulled in a million different directions. They had to readjust and get their messaging right around COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully now that we've had a little bit of time to settle into that, we can start some of these programs back up that have been put on pause. Because like you said, energy efficiency is such an important thing, especially with folks working from home more. That's something we really is a crucial area to focus on.
And we haven't even talked about, the issues about security and resiliency. And again, you touched, you made a good point, everyone, so many people are working from home now too, is that, service disruption at home is even more important. I mean, most of us were gone 8 to 10 hours a day pre-COVID. Now we're at home. Service disconnections are a big deal, especially if you're like me, you have 2 teenage daughters at home. It becomes a big problem.
So Dave, do you have a few final thoughts that you can leave our viewers with on how utilities can help consumers, particularly financially through this time? We've talked a lot about how they're going to have large bills and things like that when cutoffs start happening. What advice do you have to utilities on a couple ideas that could be most beneficial to energy customers?
Well, I think part of it's going to be, well, a couple of things. One is messaging. We got to come up with a consistent message, concise but informative as to what your policies and your messaging around what going forward means to you. What does day 2 mean, post COVID? So that's one thing. I think one of the programs I like is the ability for customers to get on a program. It's like Georgia Power is a pay-by-day program. Sometimes we'll call it flex bill pay type program, where you're getting daily bill calculations delivered every day. So customers know exactly what they're using every day, and then make payment locations and channels really easy. Maybe you can accept smaller payment amounts. So customers, because a lot of customers are going to be cash flow challenged in these times. So maybe they can make smaller, more frequent payments, but payments that really meet more their budgets, but also their cash flow that they have today. And then with messaging on that on a daily basis, allowing customers to see, because this gives also the ability to use less energy. So if they know they used $6.80 yesterday, they can go around the house and maybe turn stuff off. But having that correlation between energy usage correlated with payments, we see a real reduction, at least pre-COVID with prepay programs, anywhere from 3 to 12% less energy. That's going to help customers. Having customers having more and better information to make better energy purchases, more informed energy purchases, I think is going to be key going forward. And as as customers are making, we typically see $20 to $30 payments on average for prepay. When 20 or 30% of that maybe can be, towards paying off that arrearage, 80, 70, 80% of that towards future, that's where we've seen customers pay off arrearages in 2 to 3 months when they have a $350 bill. I mentioned the $6,000 bill is 3 years, but this is less painful, I think, to the customer. They don't have to call the call center all the time to make that payment arrangement. So again, I would suggest some sort of program that, again, we're calling kind of a flex pay program, a pay-by-day program. Look into something like that to give your customers options other than just purely payment arrangements.
Thanks, Dave. That's all great advice. I think some good tips for utilities. And again, thank you for participating and giving us your insights. We really love to hear from you, and appreciate PayGo as a member for years and years of SECC. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Nathan.